Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avatara varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha Sruti smriti purananam alayam karunalayam namami bhagavat padam Shankaram lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kridau Vande Bhagavanto Punah Punah. So we are continuing our discussion. I think we were absent for some days, but I believe we'll continue. Right now we are about to conclude the last portion of this Akashadhikaranam. Before we actually take up the subject, I want to say a few things to remind you. First of all, every Adhikaranam has got a Vishaya Vakyam. The Vishaya Vakyam of Akashadhikaranam is Akasha iti hovacha. So the connection or the Sangati, the interconnectedness with the previous Adhikaranam is Prathyudaharana Sangati. So a few things should be kept in mind, in the coming sessions, in the Pranadhikaranam and even the other following Adhikaranas, even the Samanya Adhyaya, find, you have to keep in mind that the whole background of Vedanta is discussed in the light of the Upanishads, the Upanishads, mostly Chandogya, Brihadaranyaka, Taittiriya and so on. And again, whenever there is the mention of Upasana, it always means Vaidika Devata Upasana. And we have to keep in mind that the cultural landscape of the emergence of Upanishads was very different from what it is now. There was no image worship, and there were no huge temple structures attracting thousands of devotees. And in all these upasanas, the sages used to take into consideration, they used to weave imageries and allegories around natural phenomena, trees and mountains and valleys, and also different types of yajnas and yagas, which included different types of sacrifices. So, for example, in the Akasha Adhikaranam, the Siddhanta says Akasha is Brahman, Tadlingat, Akasha is Tadlingat. In the light of the descriptions of the characteristics of Brahman that accompany that Akasha iti hovacha statement, which is called Vakya Shesha. Suppose a statement is made and something is mentioned, the actual implication or the meaning of that point becomes clear sometimes in the light of the continuing discussions. That's called Vakya Shesha. To give an example, suppose somebody describes a living being, and then 6 feet tall, 2 eyes, face, 2 hands, 2 feet, and so on. Well, you naturally assume that it is a human being. That is the Rudhyartha, the Prasiddhatara Artha. I mean, the conventional understanding of a living being with 6 feet, who is 6 feet tall, with a sort of face, 2 eyes, the facial expressions, 2 hands and 2 legs, and so on. This is our normal understanding. What we actually assume when we see it for the first time. But then in the coming statements, suppose you come across a statement that living being has a long tail, then the possibility of indicate, coming to the conclusion that entity is a human being is ruled out. How? Because the Vakyashesha, the continuing discussion of the characteristics, it's called lingas. So we already discussed this 6 pramanas that normally are employed in understanding the meaning of Vidhi-Vakyas, mostly in Mimamsa tradition. And linga is very important, indicators or characteristics which may accompany the early statement, which is called upakrama. The other one is descriptive statements later. So in the light of the Vakyashesha, you come to a better and more accurate understanding of what you're talking about. So you mean it can maybe a gorilla who is 6 feet tall, who has 2 eyes, 2 legs, but unlike human beings, it also has got a tail. To give an example, why I'm mentioning all this, because this style of Bhashyakara's description, his dialectical methods, how he comes to the conclusion that Brahman is the actual indication, the real meaning of Akasha, the real meaning of Prana, etc. That's what we are going to discuss later. Now, so Siddhanta says Akasha is Brahman because of the characteristics of Brahman. Why? Origin of creation, Akasha Deva Samutpadyante. So, that cannot be, the Akasha here cannot be Bhutakasha. As Purvapakshi is trying to establish, it is Bhutakasha. Bhutakasha cannot be the origin of the entire existence. Akasha Deva Samutpadyante. Then Akasham Pratyastam Yendi. Akasha is the point of dissolution. So that Akasha cannot be the Bhudakasha. All created entities do not get dissolved in space, Bhudakasha. And again, Sarvani, Imani Sarvani Bhudani Samutpadyante. All these, they are originating from Akasha. So that cannot be Bhudakasha. And then Akasha Parayanam, Parayanatvam, the final support. That the Bhudakasha cannot be the final support. And then Jyayan, Prithivya Jyayan, etc. That we will discuss that towards the conclusion of the Akasha Adhikaranam before we start our discussion on the next one is, that is Akasha Adhikarana, we call Prana Adhikaranam. Before we start Prana Adhikaranam, we will discuss again. Then Jyaya, then Parayanat, Parayanatvam, etc. All these are some of the indicators, characteristics, which come in the adjoining descriptions, which is called Vakyashesha, which help us to come to the conclusion, the Siddhanta, that Akasha mentioned here is not Bhudakasha, but it is Brahman. Because even this Bhudakasha is also produced from Brahman. Brahman is the origin of Bhudakasha. And again it is mentioned in the scriptures. And again this Bhudakasha cannot be an eternal substance. Atmana Akasha. So from the Atman Akasha emerges. So it comes into existence. If something comes into existence, that cannot be the origin of the entire creation. But then what about these statements? Sometimes there are statements in the description of the characteristics. Permanence, eternality, subtlety, all are mentioned. That is only for upasana, for upasyatva. That's the idea behind. So Purvapaksha says, Akasha resembles Brahman, but Akasha is eternal. So there is a similarity. That's it. Shankaracharya says no. That is Srishti, the knowledge of Srishti comes only from Shastras. And whenever there is a Mukhyartha that is obvious, then it is wrong to resort to depend upon Lakshyartha or Amukhyartha, which is Gaunartha. So these are important points. The Akasha is Brahman. The proof, it's called Lingas are mentioned. Akasha deva samutpadyandi, Akasham pratyastam yandi, Akasha hyeva ebhyo jyayan. Akasha is greater than all these. Then Akasha parayanam. Then Akasha is also mentioned as Ananta, which comes at the very conclusion of the Akasha Adhikarana discussion. We will discuss this in course of time. Now, again, just a few things about the next Adhikaranam that should be kept in mind. And also, it's very common because all these discussions are found in the early part of Chandogya Upanishad. Udgita Upasana is called Prastava Bhakti. Sama has got 5 elements we will discuss later. Prastava is one of it. And the question is discussed. What is the Devada of all this? So answer is Akasha. So the discussion comes, Akasha is Bhudakasha, Paramatma, etc. Then based on the Lingas, Siddhantin says it is Brahman, Tad Lingat. So what are the Lingas? That should be kept in mind. Lingas are 6 pramanas which are to be employed while trying to find out the actual implication of a statement in the Vidhivakyas, primarily in Purvamimamsa. But remember, Uttaramimamsa, Vedanta is a continuation of Purvamimamsa. So all those pramanas, Sadvidhalingas, these are all equally applicable to Vedanta also. So what are the pramanas? Sudhi, Vakyam, Pragaranam, Sthanam, Samakhya. So Sudhi, Lingam, Vakyam, Pragaranam, Sthanam, Samakhya. These are the 6 pramanas that should be understood in the context of Vidhivakyas. So this is an important point, remember. And again, I am repeating again for your understanding, because we discussed this earlier, but still repeating. It's called Brahmalingas. We discussed earlier. It comes to the end of the Akashalinga Adhikarana Bhashyam. The Brahmalingas called Aspashtalingas, Akasha, Prana, etc. Means it is indicative, indirect way of giving indications, characteristics of Brahman. That is Sarva Jagat Karanatvam, Sarvesham Bhudanam Utpatti. And then that is Samutpadyande, that is the Sarva Jagat Karanatva Sudhi. Tatha Akasham Pratyastam Yendi, that is the point of dissolution of all these things which originate. Again, the greatness, the fact that Akasha is greater than everything else. Akasha ebhyo jyayan, jyayastvam. Then Akasha parayanam, Akashasya parayanatvam. Then Akashasya anandyam, Akasha is ananta. All these indications show that Akasha mentioned in the Shruti is not Bhudakasha, it is Brahman itself. So that so far we have discussed. Now we'll continue from where we left in the last class. I'm not going to repeat again what we already discussed, but again, towards the end of the, towards the end of the Akashalinga Adhikaranam Bhashyam, we can say. Apicha Andavattu Doshena Shalavatyasya paksham ninditva anandam kinjit vaktu kamena jaivalina akasha parigrihitaha tam akasham udgithe sambadya upasamkaradi sa esha parovariyan udgitha sa esho ananta iti tacha anandyam brahmalingam. This is an important point, remember. So what are the what is to be kept in mind? One is, come to the text here, apicha antavattu doshena. What is antavattuam? Shalavattisya paksham ninditva. So you have to remember Dalbhya, Shalavatya and Jaivali. Dalbhya and Shalavatya are Brahmanas and Jaivali is a Kshatriya. So they were discussing among themselves about Udgita. And Dalbhya made a statement which is wrong. And then Shalavatya said, you made a statement, so that is not correct. And if in front of me, somebody who knows that it is wrong, you make the statement, Mudhate Vyapadishyati, the statement you find repeating again in many places. It only indicates when a person is trying to make an assertion of which he has no real direct knowledge. His mind gets confused, cluttered. His spiritual path is blocked because he not only doesn't know, but he thinks that what he knows is the correct thing. So his path towards further progress is completely blocked. So that idea is put in the conventional Vedic language in the Parishad, in the discussion. Your head will follow means you will be confused, you will go astray, you will be deviating from your path. It's a terrible tragedy when we believe something and then that is absolutely wrong, and then we go about telling that, and then we go about telling that in the presence of people who know it is wrong, then the man's progress is permanently blocked. You find this statement in the Brihadaranyaka, you find it in Chandogya also. So, apicha andavattu doshena. What is andavattu dosham? So, Shalavatya said that this loka, I am loka, Prithvi is the pradishtha of Sama. And the Prithvi of this loka is not eternal. It is not Ananda, it is Andavat. That statement you should try to make use of these classes, preferably with the help of the text with you. They may take time, you may have to go to the original text and turn the pages, but that be the only way of actually learning the subtle arguments of Shankaracharya. Once you understand this, you have absolutely no doubt about it. So, the context should be kept in mind with Prakritam. Pravahana Jaivali points out a great defect in Shalavatya's position. So, that defect is called Antavattu dosha. And Jaivali condemns that. Actually, the same problem you find in Shalavatya's correction of Dalbhya. And finally, Jaivali resort to something that is eternal. Compared to everything else in this world, Akasha is eternal, indicating that the support, the pradishtha of Saman should be eternal. It cannot be something limited. So this point is emphasized by Bhashya in Akasha. So finally the question is put to Jaivali, if this world is the ashraya of Sama, then what is the ashraya of this world? That is asya lokasya ka gatihi. So remember the story background. 3 scholars were engaged in Udgitobhasana. 2 Brahmanas, the Albhya and Shalavatya, and 1 Kshatriya, Pravahana Jaivali, who is a king. They are discussing Udgitobhasana. I shall explain in today's class the 5 constituents of Udgita, of Saman, and Udgita comes in the middle, Hingara and so on. I will discuss this coming times. So the point is this, Tamha Pravahano Jaivalihi Uvacha Andavadvai Kilate Shalavatya Sama. So remember the Bhashya statement. Bhashya says, Apicha Andavattu Doshena Shalavatyasya Paksham Ninditva Anandam Kinjit Vaktu Kamena Jaivalina Akasha Parigrihitaka. So why did Jaivali mention Akasha? He wanted to mention something which is Anantam Kinjit Vaktu Kamena. He wanted to mention something that is Ananta, that is infinite, that is limitless, that is ultimately transcendental. After condemning, after correcting Shalavatya's wrong view, that is, Ayam Loka is the Pradishtha of Saman. So remember, Tamha Pravahano Jaivalihi Uvacha Andavadvai Kila te Shalavatya Sama Yastu Edarhi Bhuyan Mudha te Vibadishyadidi Mudha te Vibadetiti Handahamedat Bhagavado Vedanidi Vidhihi Uvacha. So then, of course, Shalavatya requested Jaivali to explain again. This is the context to be kept in mind. So this is the context. So that is how to refer to the text to find out from which text Bhashyakara is taking the statement. So when you mention Andavattu Doshena, what is Andavattu Dosham? Is mentioned in the 8th mantra of Chandogya. Okay, that should be kept in the first chapter. That is in the Udgita Prakaranam, in the context of Udgita statement. That should be kept in mind. So, Akasha Parigrihya. Tam cha Akasha Udgite Sambhadya Upasamharati. So, this Sambhadya is an important word in Mimamsa, in the ritual, in the Kriya, and also in Vedanta. First, we have to keep in mind, in Samaveda, one rik, one mantra is divided into 5 portions. The middle portion is called Udgita. And the person who does alapana of Samaganam, of he's called Udgata. He should do a sankalpa when he is doing this Samaganam. And in the context of in the context of Udgita Alapanam, he should think in his mind that this is meant for Aditya, because Aditya is the Devata of Udgita. Sampadya means, technically it is defined as Nyune Adhigatva Bhavanam Sampadhanam Sampatupasanam. So, when you can find in many temple rituals also in modern times, in some of the, normally when we utter a mantra and then we are offering an ordinary flower or a small coin or something. But if if you cannot afford to give charity of a huge amount or do something on a big scale, and then you do something on a small scale, then you do sankalpa sincerely, then you'll get the result of the same ritual done on a higher scale. So Pashudanam, you are giving something like Pashu means a cow should be offered. In the name of Pashudana Sankalpa, you give maybe 1 coin, something like that, But if you do that, what happens is when it's done sincerely with Sankalpa, you get the result of Pashudanam. When you are offering a flower and then you do Sankalpa of a golden flower instead of ordinary flower, you get the result of offering the golden flower. It is called Sambaduvasanam. That is Nyune Adhigattabhava. Nyuna means something limited. Many of the rituals that people perform in the Shodasha Karma, Shodasha Samskaras, which involve this mantra. People fortunately don't know Sanskrit. They won't understand that they are doing it. The point is, when you do sincerely, you get the result of doing the real sacrifice when a person sincerely does it. So that is called Sambadupasanam. Similarly, when a person is doing Udgidupasana, he utters the word Om, Omkara, Saesha Parovariyan Udgidha, Saeshu Ananta Idi. You do Sankalpa. When you utter Omkara, which is Udgidha, and then you sincerely do Sankalpa, that this Omkara is infinite. It is the supreme, the most supreme among the supreme, the greatest of the great. It is all-pervading. And you identify yourself with that. This Sankalpa, after all, mind is a very important factor in whatever we do. How our mind can become very strong, much stronger than what we normally imagine. You read a book. If you read the book in a casual way, sitting maybe a Coca-Cola or something, popcorn eating Coca-Cola, you read Brahma Sutra, you may not be able to understand much about it. But suppose you do it sincerely, with a great attention, thinking that it is a sacred text from which you learn a lot of supreme Upanishadic philosophy and Advaita, that kind of dedication and sense of sanctity and sacredness. With real Sankalpa, if you do, the same book, the same words would mean much more than what it could mean when you read in a casual manner. The same mind is actually, same mind, same work. Half an hour we do with extreme sincerity and dedication, and with a strong sense of sanctity and sacredness and respect for the teacher. What happened is called Shraddha. Swami Vivekananda called it Shraddha. The difference between one person and another person is a matter of Shraddha. The person who has got Shraddha becomes greater. The person who has less Shraddha becomes so much lesser. That's all. So here, Sa Esha Parovariyan Udgidha, Sa Eshu Ananta. So with this Sankalpa, if a person does Udgidhovasana, Omkara, then he will realize his own identity with the all-pervading Brahman, which is nothing but the reality behind the verbal symbol called Omkara. So in this Bhashya, Sa means Omkara. Sa Esha Parovariyan. It is supreme among the supreme. One should meditate, do Sankalpa. Sankalpa here means not just thinking, but totally identifying with that idea. The extent with which we identify with what we do, to that extent the result also will vary. So you can imagine modern football, those who live for football, think of football, the entire life, time, everything dedicated to that, they excel in that area. Even at the physical level, you can find examples. Much more is the effect of this dedication and Saddha in spiritual life. So, Tamcha Akasham Udgite Sampadya That is Pratikopasana. It could be Sampadupasana. It could be either. But Brahman is the Abhinna Nimitta Upadana Karanam of the Jagat. And with that strong conviction, one performs Udgita Upasana, and that Onkara is meditated upon as the same as the all-pervading Brahman. That is, Saesha Parovariyan Udgita, Saesha Anantaha. Now remember, here, suppose you, instead of, suppose you take the meaning of Esha as Akasha, you cannot think of the Bhudakasha as Ananta. You meditate upon Bhudakasha, you don't become omniscient. You don't realize your own identity with the all-pervading Brahman. The Bhudakasha is just one of the material entities. It is one of the Pancha Mahabhudas, and actually our Indriyas are also only the subtle aspects of Pancha Mahabhudas. So that's why he mentioned here, Sahi means Onkara, Om, that Ananta. It is so, Tacha Anandyam Brahmalingam. So, that Anandyam is one of the important indicators of Brahman. Anantada, Anantatvam, which means Kala Paricheda, Desha Paricheda, Vastu Paricheda, Shunyatvam, devoid of any kind of limitation in terms of time, in terms of space or place, or in terms of entity. It is Advaita. Dali Kala Paricheda, Desha Paricheda, Vastu Paricheda, Shunyatvam. Because it is Sarva Jagat Karanam, it is the source of everything, it is supreme among everything, again it is the support, Pradishtha of everything, it is infinite, it is limitless. So this is another important lingam or indication, characteristic of Brahman. This cannot be understood in the context of Bhudakasha. So Purvakshin's argument, the Akasha in this Veda mantra, Akasiti Hovaja, the Akasha, the Purvakshin's view that Akasha means Bhudakasha, that is demolished, that is refuted by Bhashyakara. To the end. Again, Bhashyakara takes up some other points that the Purvakshin made earlier. So remember one, there is Akashabda in Upakrama. What is Akashabda? That is Sarvani Bhudani Akashadeva Samutpadyande. That is Upakrama. And then there is Upasamhara also. Why? Brahmalingam is mentioned. Saesha Anantaha. So this is an important point. Now, Yat Punaruktam Bhudakasham Prasiddhi Balena Prathamataram Pratiyate iti. So Bhashyakara is here turning to some other arguments that Purvakshin made earlier. Prasiddhadaram could mean Rudhyartham. When you read something, listen to something, the meaning that comes to you automatically, that is the conventional meaning, the meaning that is normally used. It's the sense in which the word is used in social conventions, in normal conversations and so on. That is Rudhi. The Rudhyartha can be different from Yogikartha. I already mentioned this earlier. One of students wrote and I explained this earlier. Rudhi, Yogika, etc. I mentioned earlier. So, Yat Punaruktam Bhudakasham Prasiddhi Balena. Prasiddhi Bala means normal, conventional understanding in human conversation. Prathamadaram could mean Upakrama. Upakrama, in the Upakrama statement, Akasha Shabda, that is Akasha Deva Samutpadyande. You are hearing the first time Upakrama, the beginning of it. So there you may think Akasha means Bhudakasha. This idea. Atra Brumaha. Prathamadaram praditamabi sad vakyasheshagadan brahmagunan drishtva na parigrihyade. This is a common principle. Prathamadaram, that is upakrama. In the upakrama, something is mentioned, and then you understand something. Rudhyartham, you get the conventional meaning. Without looking at the dictionary, you may already understand, you may get a sense of the word. Maybe that will be different from the dictionary meaning. But what sense that word immediately creates in our mind. So, Pradhamadaram Pratitamabi Sat Vakyashesha Gadan Brahmagunan Drishtwana Parigrihyada. But then after that word, in the continuing discussions, a few characteristics may be mentioned. Lagi Vakyashesha. In the following statements, Brahmagunan Drishtva, the characteristics or indicators of Brahman, the lingas of Brahman, already given. So in that case, the Pradhamadaram na parigrihyade. In that case, the meaning that comes to you at the upakrama level, it cannot be taken. I mentioned this earlier. When you see or hear something, a tall being with 2 hands, 2 feet, 6 feet tall, and so you think it's a human being, and then eventually you find out it is, or maybe later on you find it doesn't move, it doesn't talk, it is stagnant, it's dead, inert. That it could be a statue also. So, because later there are descriptions that living being, living you imagine, it may not be living, but it doesn't talk, it doesn't move, it is inert, you can pierce it, it doesn't react. In that case, it could be a picture or it could be a statue. So later description, Vakya Sesha, these are characters I mentioned. This Dvana Parigrihyade. Then what happens? The Prasiddha Pradhamadaram, the Upakrama, where you first hear this, that meaning is now rejected in the light of what you later learn about it. So, Akashu Vai Nama Namarupayo Nirvihita Ityado. So, Akasha is the revealer, is the creator. It is the source of all the nama and rupa. All nama rupas are their adhara in Akasha. Now, suppose you listen to this as some kind of a Vakyasesha. Akasho vai nama rupayo nirvihida ityado, and statement. Akasha is the one which reveals everything. Akasha is the adhara, the pradishtha of all nama and rupa. That Akasha cannot be Bhudakasha. It could be Brahman only. This is how Bhashyakara establishes. So you remember, Purvapakshim takes one view based on what the particular word appears to mean. It is Prathamadaram, that is the Upakrama statement, or Rudhyartha. But then Bhashyakara says, if in the following statements, there are indicators which contradict or are in conflict with the Upakrama statement, then Upakrama statement cannot be accepted. Then this conflict will arise. The Akasha that you talked about, Akasha Vayu, Rakni, Agni, Rapaka, etc. That you talked about, that Akasha cannot be the Adhara or Pradishtha or the source of that Akasha cannot be manifestation of something that Akasha cannot manifest in terms of Nama and Rupa. The Nama Rupa Jagat cannot emerge from that Akasha. That Akasha cannot be the revealer of the entire Nama Rupa Jagat. So in the light of the later statements, you reject the previous understanding, the Prathamadaram meaning. Ityado. So it should be kept in mind, whenever there is no conflict between Upakrama Vakya and Vakya Shesha, then Upakrama can be accepted. Whenever there is a conflict between what it means as the Upakrama and also the meaning that comes to you after reading the Vakya Shesha, then you should know it is Vakya Shesha that is the deciding factor. I hope you understand it. If you don't understand, you can ask me. Because I cannot give a very elaborate description or translation of Vakya Shesha. That should be understood as a technical term, to be understood as in technology and internet or whatever you use it. You don't translate every technical word from physics and information technology into vernacular. You don't do that. Similarly, every Vedantic technical word term cannot be translated. It's not because of problem of language. It'd be wrong to translate because those words have a fixed, well-defined meaning used by scholars, writers for centuries. So Vakya Shesha should be understood. What is Vakya Shesha? Something that comes later. That's why I give this elaborate example. Example can never do full justice to what we are trying to explain in the light of examples. Examples can only give an approximation of it, not exact meaning. Tatha akasha paryaya vachinamapi brahmani prayogo drishyate. Now again a statement is there. Akasha paryaya. Paryaya means synonyms. There are many synonyms of akasha used to indicate Brahman. Vyoma Shabda is one. So this is coming to that. Rucho Akshare Parame Vyomni Asmin Deva Adi Vishwe Nisheduhu. It's already mentioned here. In which Vyoma, which Akasha, Vyoma is another Paryaya synonym of Akasha. Vyomni in Akasha. All these Devatas are established. They are all established in that Akasha. And what is that Akasha? That Akasha is Anashwara. It is Krishna. Akshare Parame Vyomni Asmin Deva Adi Vishwe Nisheduhu. So all these Devatas are well established in that Akasha. And that Akasha is eternal. Akshara, Parame, it is Uttishtatamam. So, what is that Akasha? That Akasha, the Vyoma Shabda is a Paryaya, a synonym of Akasha. And it is used to imply Brahman. So remember the context. Shalavatya's view is, this loka is Pradishtha Sama. Jaivali said, wrong, you're wrong. Why? Because that statement of yours has got Sandada dosha, Andavattu dosha. Both are experts in Udgita Jnanam. But then, one person is just a karmi. He does perform all these karmas. So if a person performs any karma, kriya, and any prayoga and Vedic rituals, without understanding the meaning, also if he utters a mantra, or especially Somayaga and so on, without meditating on the Devada, behind that mantra, and without understanding the meaning, without understanding the Devada, then what happens is, And again, if he does it in the presence of others or some scholars who understand it, then it will be wrong for him. That is true. Suppose you know some little music and you are going to give a performance in the presence of some professional musicians, you will be ridiculed actually. You won't dare to perform a great your own music unless you are an amateur. If you are a professional, you may do in the presence of professionals. More or less same idea. So this is often the fact that it is wrong is indicated by Murdhate Vyabadishyati. In other words, the Purvapakshin says it is Bhudakashatvena Brahmopasana. It is ridiculous and wrong. Siddhantin says Brahmatvena Omkaropasana. That is Omkara Gita. So Omkara is Brahman, Omkara is Ananta, Omkara is Sarvajagat Karanam, Bhudanam Utpatti Sthiti Laya Karanam. Again, Omkara is Ebhyo Jyayan, supreme, greater than everything, Akasha Parayanam, it is the Pradishtha, it is the ultimate support. It is also infinite and limitless. So Siddhantin Brahmatvena Omkaro Vasana. And Purvapakshin Bhudakashatvena Brahma Upasana, that it is contradicted by Bhashyakara. He demolishes the Purvapakshin's view. So Pradhamadaram Praditamapi Sat Vakyasesha Gatan Brahmagunan Dustvana Parigrihyate. If you have got a doubt, you can ask. Dasyadascha Brahmani api Akasha Shabdaha. So there are also examples where Akasha Shabda is used in the sense, the meaning, Brahman. Example is given, Akasho vai nama rupayor nirvihida tyado, etc. Already explained. Tata Akasha Paryaya Vanchinam api Brahmani prayogo drishyate. Not only that, there are number of examples, quite a number of examples where Paryaya Shabda, so synonyms of Akasha are used in the sense of Brahman. Example is given. Rujo Akshare Parame Vyomni Asmin Deva Ati Vishwe Nishetahu. Vyoma Shabda is Akasha. Akasha here could only mean Brahman. That's all. So then the Rigveda Samhita mantra it comes. First mandala, 164th sutta. So you, instead of Ashtama Varga, you can always look for the mandala, sutta, rig in that tradition. In that way you can try to refer to Rigveda text. The other one is sometimes popular among those who do traditional chanting. Saisha, Bhargavi, Varuni, Vidya, Parame, Vyoman, etc. Look at the text, next page of the text. Pradisthida, etc. So that is again, that is Bhrigu Vai Varuni, Varunam, Pindram Upasasara, etc. This already, you already familiar with this. I think I don't need to explain it further. So that is already, you all chant this mantra sometimes in training center, etc. You find. So, Taittiriya. Om, this mantra may be new to you. Om Kam Brahma, Chandogya. It comes there. Om. Here, Kam Brahma. Kam here means bliss, Ananda, Sukha. That is bliss. Om Kam Brahma. Again, Kam Brahma. Kam means Akasha. So it clearly mentioned here. Kam Puranam. Kam also means Akasha, but Kam is called Puranam, eternal. Iti Idjaiva Madhu. There are different examples where Akasha Shabda Kam used to indicate Brahman very clearly. Iti Chaiva Madhu Vakyopakrame. Vakyopakrame api Vartamanasya Agasha Shabdasya Vakyashesha Vashat Yuktya Brahma Visheta Avadharana. So this is an important point. So Vakyopakrame. That is, Om is that eternal Akasha I mentioned here. Vakyopakrame. It's already mentioned here. That is at the beginning, Vakyopakrame api. Vartamanasya Akasha Shabdasya. So the word Akasha Shabda, Akasha, it comes at the beginning. That is Upakrama. Vakashesha Vashat Yuktya Brahma Vishita Avadharana. So the word Akasha, which may not obviously mean Brahman at the Upakrama. Vakyopakrame api vartamanasya akashabdasya Vakashesha Vashat Yuktya. In the light of that Vakashesha Nyayaha. So Upakrama Nyayaha Vakya Sesha Nyayaha. So when Upakrama and Vakya Sesha are the same, then Upakrama Prabalyam. When Upakrama will have relevance and importance. When Upakrama and Vakya Sesha are non-different, then Upakrama and Vakya Sesha will have equal acceptance, authenticity. Upakrama Prabalya. But then, if there is a difference between Upakrama Vakya and Vakya Sesha, then Vakya Sesha is to be accepted as authentic. Because then there will be doubt. So, this is a Mimamsa tradition. Maybe before going further, I shall give the next example. Aknihi adhite anuvakam. Idihi vakyopakramakado api agnishabdo manavaka vishayo drishyate. Tasmat akashabdam brahma idi siddham. So Agnihi adhiti. Agni, you know Agni. Agni is fire. Agni Deva. So you can't say Agni is reading. Anuvakam, it could mean a section, maybe a chapter of Vedas. Anuvaka. A small chapter, sometimes maybe even a paragraph may be called an Anuvaka. When it becomes very big section, it will be called Prasna. So you can find Prasna Upanishad Prasna. It's a very big, relatively bigger section. It's called Prasna. When that chapter is small, sometimes it could be even a paragraph, it is called Anuvaka. So Agnihi Anuvakam Adhite. Okay. Idihi Vakyopakrama Gataha api Agni Shabdo Manavaka Visho Drishyate. Now remember, Manavaka means a brahmachari. A brahmachari who is like Agni in his splendor, in his purity, in his Brahmateja, he may be like Agni. So in that case, Agnihi Adhite could mean a brahmachari who is as pure as Agni, is studying, reading, Anuvaka, a section, or a prasna, bigger Anuvaka, of a text, Vedic text. So here, Agni doesn't mean, Agni can never mean fire. Agni always means Manavaka, brahmachari. So an example. Because Manavaka Shabda comes later. So what does it mean? It means brahmachari. So the Upakrama Prabalyam and Upasamhara Prabalyam, this is a Mimamsa tradition that should be kept in mind. So Vakya Upakramadobi Agni Shabdo Manavaka Vishayo Drishyate. This is an important point. Similarly, when there is a conflict between what comes at the Upakrama and what comes later, then what comes later is more important. And because there are so many indicators, lingas, that come one after another. After Akasho, Havaja, etc., that Upakrama statement of Akasha, there are so many statements. Akasha iti Havaja, Sarvani Hava Imani Bhudani, Akasha Deva Samutpadyandi, Akasham Pratyastam Yendi, etc. That is Upakrama. So that should be kept in mind here. Vakya Upakrame. What is Vakya Upakrama? Akasha iti Hovacha, Sarvani Hava Imani Bhudani, Akasha Deva Samutpadyandi, Akasham Pratyastam Yendi. Upakrama. So Vakya Upakramepi Vartamanasya Akasha Shabdasya Vakya Sesha Vashad means Vakya Sesha Nyayena. That method of interpreting, giving more importance to Vakya Sesha than Upakrama when there is a conflict between the two. Because based on that Yukti, Vakya Sesha Vashad Yuktya, Brahma Vishettu Avadharana, it should be understood as Brahman. That's the idea behind. We already gave the example. Kam, Akasha, Vyoman. All these words are Paryayas of Akasha. Kam means Akasha. Akasha, of course, means Akasha. Vyoman also Akasha. And here you find they're all used not to imply Bhudakasha, but to clearly indicate Brahman. That's the idea behind. Now comes to Pranadhiranam. So there are a few things to be maybe explained in the context of this. So you come across this where Pranadhiranam. Before that, a few ideas should be kept in mind. So you know the Chandogya we are quoting this from Soma, so it's Soma tradition, Samaveda tradition, Soma sacrifice, Udgita Vasana, all these are mentioned here. In the Soma sacrifice, there are 16 Ritiks who are arranged under 4 priests: Hoda, Udgata, Adhiryu, Brahman. And each will be attended by 3 assistants, forming 4 traditional groups within the ritual structure. Of course, there are different textual variations. But Hoda, Maitra Varuna, Achavaga, Gavastu, Udgatru, Prastotra. So in Prastoda you find here, and you can find in the Pranadhiranam. Pradhiharta, another, Brahmanya, Adhiryu, Pradiprastatra. Pradiprastada means Pradiprastatra. Nestru, Unnetru, Brahma, Brahmana Chamsin, Potra, Agnintra. These are the priests. They mean this is the entire group. 16 in number. The 16 priests of Soma sacrifice. According to Rigveda tradition, there may be slightly different in some other, according to some other traditions. They're all based on Vaidika Upasana tradition. So, there are certain words that are used here. Prastava. Prastava is the beginning of the chanting of Prastava. In the Evada, at the very beginning, somebody will chant this mantra. So I think we have to refer to that text better. So you have to look at this text at some point. It may be helpful. So what is the context? The context is Udgita Vasana. That's a Prakritam. So a great scholar who was not only a great scholar but also very, very poor, financially very poor. He goes to a king who is a Yajamana, who is performing a huge Vedic sacrifice. Yajamana is a person for whom these Rutiks or the priests are performing a yajna. So after performing the yajna, when the king or Yajamana gives dakshina to the priest, then the benefit, adrishta phalam, or benefits, spiritual benefits of this Vedic sacrifice will go to the Yajamana. That's why when you go to a temple and the priest performs a puja, if you don't give dakshina, then the punya phala will go to the priest. So when you give dakshina, that benefit will come to you. So that's the idea. So here is a story, for example, this Ushasti Chakrayana. He belonged to Chakravamsa, it's called Chakrayana. So he goes to a king. And he was very poor, so he heard that there's a king is performing a huge sacrifice, maybe Somayaga. So he wanted some money. He was very, very poor, though he was a very learned person, but very poor. So you can see this old tradition, get an idea of the ancient Vedic tradition. In the Bhagavata Purana, you find 9 sages who are great scholars, Brahmajnanis, devotees. They go to a king. Or Yajnavalkya and Brihadaranyaka Upanishad goes to the king Janaka. They were not looking for money. They were looking for something else. Ushasti was looking for his own sustenance. So in the Bhagavata Purana, even Kavir Hari Andariksha Prabuddha Pipalayana Avihotrota Durmilas Chamasa Karabhajanaka. So Kavihi Hari Andariksha Prabuddha Pipalayana Avihotra Durmila Chamasa Karabhajanaka. 9 sages go to Nimi, and Nimi asks the question, one question each to each of the 9 sages, Navayogis, Nimi Navayogi Samvada. So this Ushasi was a different person. He wanted money. So when he reached there, what he did, of course, there's an interesting text here, 8th mantra. Tatta Udgatri Nastavis Toshimanan Upopavesha Saha Prastodaram Uvacha. Prastodariya Devada Prastava Manyayata Tam Chid Avidwan Prastyoshaji Mudhati Vibhidishyati. So, Ushasi went to this Soma sacrifice, and then he told this Prastoda, a Prastava. That is where the mantra begins in the Pranadhiranam. So you have to keep that in mind, Udgithe prastotarya devada prastava manyayata iti upakramya suyate. So this idea behind. So there's a text that comes in Chandogya. Anyayata means he's addressing this prastada. Are you performing this ritual, and do you know on which devada you should meditate and on which devada you should do sankalpa when you do this prastava, means this stotra, means the sama, when you chant the sama, do you know on which devada you should do sankalpa and who is connected to this particular mantra, and on which devada you should meditate? If you are doing it without knowing this, in my presence, who know all about this, then your head will fall off. So this is the context. This he repeats a few times. Prastodarya devada prastava manyayata tam chet avidwan prastoshyasi murdhate vyabadishyati iti. Prastava Bhakti. So, Prastava means that particular aspect of Veda mantra is called Prastava. That particular aspect is called. Again, he went to Udgata. Evam Udgataram Uvacha. Udgatar ya devata Udgitam Anvayata tam ched avidwan udgasyasi murdhate vibhidishyati. So, Ushasti, first he told Prastoda, then he told Udgata. Evam Udgataram Uvacha. He went to Udgata, the one who chants Udganam, Samaganam. Ya Devada Udgitam Anvayatta. What is the Devada who is connected to this mantra, this chanting, this Udgitam chanting, and on which Devada you should do Sankalpa and meditate. Without knowing this, if you are doing it in the presence of me who know this, Mudate Vivadishiti. Then he went to Pradhikarta. Evameva Pradhikartaram Uvacha. Pradhikartarya Devada Pradhikartaram Anvayata Tam Cheda Vidwan Pradhikarishyasi Mudate Vivadishiti. Etc. This is the context. That means one should not do a kriya without knowing Devada, without knowing Sankalpa, the meaning of the mantra, etc. Then what happens? It may create problems for you. Ataha enam prastoda upasasada prastodarya devada prastava manvayatatam cheda vidwan prastoda yasasi mudate vivadishididi ma bhagavan avochat kadamasa devada idi. Okay, then this man, this Prastoda told Ushasi, you told me that if I do this karma without knowing the Agni Devada, without knowing the Sankalpa, without meditating, without thinking of the Devada while chanting this mantra, then your head will fall off. You told me this. Who is that Devada? Can you tell me that? So, Prastoda told Ushasi. Like that it continues, so there is no need to repeat everything. Prana iti hovaja sarvani imani bhudani pranameva abhisamvisandi pranam abhi ujjihate saisha devada prastava manvayatta tam cheda vidwan prastoshya mudate vibhidishyati tata uktasya maya iti. This is meaning of it. So what he said is prana iti hovaja. He said prana is the devada of prastoda, prastava, the particular part of Udgita, that is prana. And again explains prana iti hovaja sarvani imani bhudani pranameva abhisamvishanti. All these Bhudas, everything endures in prana. And then pranam abhijihate. They emerge from prana. And this prana is the devada of this mantra. Prishta prana iti hovaja yuktam prastavasya prano devati katham sarvani sthavara jangamani bhudani pranameva abhisamvishanti pralayagale pranam abhi lakshayitva pranatmaeva ujjihate pranadeva udgachanti ityarthaha utpattigale. The Bhashyam. So this is the context. You have to keep this in mind. This is the context. So a Greek scholar who goes to a yajna, and he talks. Then, of course, the king himself will come and ask him, take the entire responsibility for the whole sacrifice. And Ushasti will tell him, well, I'm ready to do that, but you should allow other rituals to continue their rituals with my permission. You should give them whatever dakshina, whatever they are entitled, but at the same time you should give me the equal of all of their dakshina combined. This is how the text proceeds. So this is a context that should be kept in mind. Urgite prastota ya devada prastavamanyayata idi upakramya suyade katama sa devadedi prana idi hovaja sarvani havimani bhudani pranameva abhisambhishanti pranam abhijihate saisha devada prastavamanyayata iti tatra samsya nirnayo purvadeva trustavyo. Now remember, there is a similarity between Akashadhigaranam and Pranadhigaranam. Mukhasto vayurisho va prana prastava devada vayu bhave tatra supto bhuta sarintya kshayat etc. Anyway, so this is the Vyasa, that is Nyaya, that is Singeri Swamiji's book, Nyaya Mala, Vaiyasika Nyaya Mala, that we'll discuss later. When we discuss Pranadhigaranam, next session we'll discuss in detail. To try to read, if possible, the particular section of the Chandogya Upanishad. We cannot read the entire Bhashya of the Chandogya section. Better to keep in mind, to get an idea of this context. Then you'll be able to enjoy this discussion much better, much more productive and constructive. So we'll continue today. Sorry, we'll conclude today. We'll continue next session. Okay? Okay.
Maharaj, Chandogya, what is the section? What is the mantra number?
Okay. Let me see. I tell you. Sometimes I go from memory. Sometimes I go to text. So just a minute. So this is first chapter, 10th section, 8th mantra which I quoted. Of course, the whole thing, I quoted early section also, 188 also I quoted. And also I quoted this mantra, that is first chapter, 10th, 7 and 8, etc. So if you go there, you find Udvidhopasana, you find, etc. That is 10th Khanda, first chapter, 10th Khanda is quoted. So, Ushasti tells Prastoda, Ushasti tells Padiharta, he also talks to Udgata, all this. So that is 10th Khanda, mantra number 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, etc. Okay? We may not get time to discuss the Bhashya itself of the Chandogya, but it will be helpful for you to better understand and appreciate the discussion. Thank you. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.